John Daigle here, and these are my top 10 running backs for Week 14. Number 10, Melvin Gordon. Gordon's averaged 21 touches the past 4 games, including 22 this last week against the Broncos. You're going back to him with ease against the Jags defense that's allowed the 5th most rushing yards on the season. Number 9, Aaron Jones. Jones has 6 targets and 15 total touches against the Giants, or actually his most since Week 8, an encouraging sign heading into Green Bay's plus matchup against Washington this Sunday. Number 8, Saquon Barkley. As disappointing as he's been, Barkley still saw 7 targets and 19 carries against the Packers and projects to finish Week 14 ranked top 10 in touches among his position, especially with Eli Manning under center, who typically has thrown to him frequently in the past. Number 7, Nick Chubb. Even with Kareem Hunt heavily involved over their last 4 games together, Chubb's averaged 21 carries in that span. The Bengals have allowed the 4th most rushing yards to opposing running backs. Number 6, Leonard Fournette. Fournette's seen double-digit targets in 2 straight contests and shouldn't slow down with Gardner Minshew back under center, considering he averaged 20 carries and 5.6 targets with Minshew in their previous first 8 starts together. Number 5, Dalvin Cook. Cook's situation is obviously touch and go and could change throughout the week with every daily update, but fantasy players have to start him against the Lions if he's active, since the Vikings are favored by 2 touchdowns at home. Number 4, Alvin Kamara. Even at the 49ers limit Kamara's rushing production, his 9.3 targets per game over the last month keep him as one of the safest high-floor options at his position in Week 14. Number 3, Derrick Henry. The Raiders don't have a chance against Derrick Henry, who's now averaged 22.7 carries, 165 yards, and nearly 2 scores per game in his last 3 contests. Remember, the most fantasy production in his career has come in the month of December. Number 2, Ezekiel Elliott. Elliott's season-high 10 targets and an embarrassing showing on Thanksgiving proved his production and opportunity will be there no matter the defense or game script he faces with the Cowboys weekly. Number 1, Kristin McCaffrey. McCaffrey's 21 touches and 13 targets in Carolina's Week 13 loss were his low point. His 17-point performance in PPR leagues still showed just how safe of a play he is weekly. This week against the Falcons included, and a new regime and a new coach shouldn't change that down, as they all have something to play for.
Ian Hartitz here. Here are my top 10 wide receiver plays of the week. On number 10, I have Calvin Ridley. The guy's only had 8 career games with at least 8 targets. In 6 of those games, he's been a top 12 PPR wide receiver. In the other 2, he was still in the top 20, avoiding James Bradbury as long as Julio Jones is back. You need Ridley in your lineups. Number 9, his teammate, Julio Jones. I know he's banged up. This is still Julio Jones. If he's active, he needs to be treated as a wide receiver 1, and he's due for an eruption, currently on the longest touchdown list streak of his career. Number 8, I have Julian Edelman. Life hasn't been easy in his Patriots offense, but here we are in Week 14, and Edelman is the PPR wide receiver 5. Only question is how much the Patriots will pass versus the run-funneled Chiefs, but Edelman needs to be treated as a wide receiver 1. Number 7, I have DJ Moore. DJ Moore has been ridiculously hot recently, but it's honestly been the whole season where he's the PPR wide receiver 9. And again, that floor in recent weeks has been just ridiculous. At least 75 yards and 6 catches in 7 of his last 8 games. The floor is pretty much the roof for DJ Moore. Number 6, I have Chris Goblin, your PPR wide receiver 2 on the season. I know it hasn't been the most consistent second half. With that said, he was the week's overall wide receiver 1 as recently as Week 12. Don't overthink this. Keep going back to Goblin. Number 5, I have Tyreke Hill. When Patrick Mahomes is under center, we got to have Tyreke Hill as a top 5 wide receiver. I know the Patriots. I know they've been great against wide receivers. With that said, Tyreek should avoid Stephon Gilmore. In past matchups, Patriots have chosen to bracket him, double, and then put Gilmore on Sammy Watkins. So, yes, that worked in the AFC Championship. Didn't work so well in the regular season when Tyreek went for 3 touchdowns. Number 4, I have Mike Evans, your PPR wide receiver 3 on the season, kind of like Chris Goblin. Just don't overthink this. With that said, one of the big complaints about Evans and Goblin is that they haven't gone off in the same weeks. Not entirely true. They were both top 10 wide receivers in Week 4 and Week 6. After each were not too good last week, major bounce back spot against the Colts. Number 3, I have DeAndre Hopkins. He handled the Stephon Gilmore matchup as well as anyone could have hoped. Chris Harris is awesome. With that said, we've seen him lose battles to Tyreek Hill, Stephon Diggs, John Brown, OBJ, among others. Continue to treat Hopkins as a top 3 player at the position. Number 2, I have Davante Adams. At least 6 catches in all 4 of his games since coming back from injury. At least 10 targets in every single one of those games. We haven't seen the eruption spot yet, but I think it's coming this week. in Lambeau as massive favorites over the Redskins. And number 1, who else would it be but Michael Thomas, currently on pace to break Marvin Harrison's NFL record for receptions in a single season. 49ers aren't an ideal matchup, but with that said, they don't move their cornerbacks, and Richard Sherman is banged up with a knee injury anyway. Continue to treat Michael Thomas as the best fantasy, and maybe even real life, wide receiver in football.
Josh Norris here with the top 5 plays at quarterback for Week 14. Let's start at number 5, Matt Ryan against the Carolina Panthers. Matt Ryan hasn't been great since Week 6, but he's facing a Panthers team with a struggling defense who just fired their head coach. So it'd be surprising if Ryan doesn't put up multiple touchdowns in this game. Number 4, Patrick Mahomes against the New England Patriots. Shockingly, Mahomes has thrown for just 182 and 175 yards in the past 2 weeks and just 2 touchdown passes. The consistent big plays just really aren't there right now, drive in and drive out, but it's really too difficult to leave him outside the top 5 list, even if he's facing a very good Patriots defense. Number 3, Deshaun Watson against the Denver Broncos. We know the story with the Texans offense. It hinges on hitting big plays. They did that versus the Patriots, and they most likely can do that against this, I'm not going to say pedestrian, but lesser Denver Broncos defense, especially with a healthy Will Fuller and Kenny Stills getting down the field. Number 2, Russell Wilson against the Los Angeles Rams. In terms of fantasy, Russell Wilson is on a hot streak of pedestrian numbers, which is not the type of hot streak that we want. But Wilson has been a top 5 scorer in each of his past 3 games versus these Rams, throwing 10 touchdown passes in those contests. So maintain confidence with Russ. Number 1, Lamar Jackson against the Buffalo Bills. Those of you with Lamar Jackson on your fantasy rosters likely have a bye in the first round of the playoffs anyways, but Lamar Jackson recorded his 4th 100-yard rushing game of the season in Week 13, the most ever in a year for a quarterback in league history. The Bills' defense is very good, but no team is ready for the running and passing style that the Ravens bring to the ballgame. Now let's take a look at the top 5 tight ends for Week 14. And it starts at number 5 with Hunter Henry against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Henry is coming off a season low of 3 targets. And he's facing the Jaguars, and they aren't facing a lot of tight end targets this year, but when they are, they're getting destroyed by the position, allowing at least 2 fantasy points per target. Number 4, Darren Waller against the Tennessee Titans. It looks like we are over that dry spell that we saw for Waller at some point in the season. He had 100 yards last week versus the Kansas City Chiefs. And with Hunter Renfrow, the Raiders slot receiver, likely out again, expect Waller to dominate those intermediate and middle of the field targets for the Raiders. Number 3, Zach Ertz against the New York Giants. This Eagles offense is still a major struggle to watch, but Ertz is still the most reliable piece for Carson Wentz to throw to when healthy. The Giants defense is always a great spot for tight ends, so Ertz should see at least 9 targets in this game, which is actually his season average this year. Number 2, Travis Kelce against the New England Patriots. 90 yards in each of the last 2 games. That's what Travis Kelce has to his name. I know this is a tough matchup. No one really wants to play anyone against the Patriots, but Kelce is a dominant force. He and Tyreke Hill are the keys to the Chiefs receiving game, and he's a difficult matchup for any defense, even a top one like the Patriots. Number 1, George Kettle against the New Orleans Saints. It was likely due to the weather last week, but Kettle wasn't a major factor against the Ravens, just notching 4 targets, 2 receptions, and 17 yards. But let's not forget, prior to that, 6 receptions, 79 yards and a touchdown, and then 6 receptions, 129 yards, and another score. Keep playing the best tight end in football with full confidence.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.